Today, we turn our attention to one of the most controversial, combative, and yes, disruptive presidents in American history, Andrew Jackson. Now, when modern commentators use the word disruptive, they usually mean divisive, dangerous, or in need of better manners. But in the early 19th century, disruption was sometimes exactly what the Republic required. And if you want to understand Jackson, you must understand this. He did not enter Washington to preserve the status quo. He entered it to blow it up. And in many respects, that is precisely why he was an effective president. Before we discuss the bank, the debt, or nullification, we must talk about the man himself. Andrew Jackson was not a polished Virginia aristocrat like Thomas Jefferson or James Madison. He was born in the Carolina backcountry, orphaned during the Revolutionary War, scarred physically and emotionally by British captivity. He carried a bullet in his chest from a duel. He killed a man in another duel. He once beat an attempted assassin with his cane when the assassin's pistols misfired. This was not a man inclined toward half measures. Jackson took political conflict personally because he believed politics was personal. To him, questions of public policy were questions of honor, loyalty, and survival of the Republic. He famously declared, "I was born for a storm, and a calm does not suit me." And he meant it. I would argue that this intensity, so often criticized, was precisely what made him effective. He did not see politics as an academic seminar. He saw it as a battlefield where the future of Republican government was at stake. Let us begin with the most famous disruption of Jackson's presidency, the destruction of the Second Bank of the United States. The bank had been chartered in 1816, modeled loosely on Alexander Hamilton's financial system. Its president, Nicholas Biddle, was intelligent, sophisticated, and absolutely convinced of his own superiority. By the 1830s, the bank controlled a significant portion of the nation's credit. It regulated state banks, influenced currency supply, and wielded enormous financial leverage. Jackson saw this not as stability, but as concentrated, unaccountable power. In his 1832 veto message, Jackson wrote, "It is to be regretted that the rich and powerful too often bend the acts of government to their selfish purposes." Now, conservatives today often support financial institutions as engines of stability. But Jackson's objection was not to capitalism. It was to privilege. The bank enjoyed a federal charter, public deposits, and extraordinary influence without direct democratic accountability. When Congress rechartered the bank in 1832, Jackson vetoed it. That veto was disruptive. It outraged the political establishment. It ignited an election battle, and Jackson won re-election decisively, carrying 219 electoral votes to Henry Clay's 49. The American people endorsed the disruption. Jackson then removed federal deposits from the bank, placing them in selected state banks. His opponents called him a tyrant. Clay thundered in the Senate. Biddle attempted to contract credit to create an economic downturn, essentially proving Jackson's point about the bank's power. Was it messy? Absolutely. Did it contribute to instability later? Historians debate that. But from Jackson's perspective, and from a conservative emphasis on limiting centralized financial power, he had struck a blow against an entrenched elite institution that he believed threatened Republican equality. Disruption, in this case, was a check on concentrated economic authority. Now let us turn to the nullification crisis of 1832-1833. South Carolina, led intellectually by John C. Calhoun, argued that a state had the right to nullify federal tariffs it deemed unconstitutional. The Tariff of 1828, labeled the Tariff of Abominations, had deeply angered Southern planters. Calhoun's doctrine of nullification rested on a compact theory of the Constitution. States had created the federal government and therefore could judge its actions. Now here is the irony. Jackson was a champion of states' rights in many respects, but he was first and foremost a nationalist when it came to preserving the Union. When South Carolina passed its Ordinance of Nullification, Jackson did not waffle. He did not commission a blue ribbon panel. He issued the Force Proclamation, declaring disunion by armed force is treason. He requested from Congress the Force Bill, authorizing military action if necessary. Let that sink in. The same man accused of executive overreach in the bank war threatened military force to preserve federal law. But here is the key point. Jackson was disruptive in both directions. He disrupted elite financial power, and he disrupted radical state resistance. He would not allow the Union to be torn apart. At the same time, he supported a compromise tariff engineered by Henry Clay, gradually lowering rates, force and compromise, strength and negotiation. The crisis passed without bloodshed. In an era when sectional tensions were rising, Jackson's firmness likely postponed disunion by a generation. His message was unmistakable. Federal laws would be enforced, but grievances would be addressed. That is, disruption harnessed to stability. Now let us talk about something modern Americans find almost mythical: paying off the national debt. When Jackson took office in 1829, the national debt stood at roughly $58 million. Through a combination of tariff revenue, land sales, and aggressive fiscal discipline, the federal government eliminated the national debt entirely in 1835. Let me repeat that. In 1835, under Andrew Jackson, the United States had zero national debt, the only time in American history. I pause here for dramatic effect, zero. Now, this achievement did not happen accidentally. Jackson distrusted debt deeply. He saw it as a mechanism by which future generations were shackled and political corruption flourished. His administration reduced federal spending and used surplus revenues to retire obligations. Critics argue that the surplus contributed to speculative excess and the panic of 1837 under his successor, Martin Van Buren. That debate continues. But consider the principle. Jackson believed that government should live within its means. He treated public finance the way a stern frontier father treated household accounts. Disruptive? Yes, especially to those accustomed to patronage, easy credit, and federal largesse. But from a limited government perspective, profoundly responsible. Jackson's presidency redefined the executive office. He used the veto power more than all previous presidents combined, not merely on constitutional grounds, but on policy grounds. He believed the president was the direct representative of the people. His opponents called him King Andrew IV. He took that as a compliment. But here is the deeper constitutional point. Jackson expanded democratic accountability in the presidency. He believed that if he was elected by a national constituency, he had a mandate to act boldly. He did not hide behind Congress. He confronted it. And yes, he took conflict personally. When Calhoun maneuvered against him, Jackson socially froze him out. When Biddle challenged him, he escalated. When enemies criticized his wife Rachel during the 1828 campaign, he never forgot it. Was he thin-skinned? Undoubtedly. But his personal intensity translated into political resolve. He did not retreat under pressure. He did not triangulate. He did not poll test every instinct. In moments of crisis, bank war, nullification crisis, that firmness mattered. Now, let me be clear. Jackson's presidency was not without grave moral controversy. His policy toward Native Americans, culminating in the Indian Removal Act, his refusal to enforce the Supreme verdict on this unconstitutional law, is a noteworthy critique on Jackson's presidential legacy. But our focus today is on disruption as a governing strategy. Jackson disrupted financial elites through the bank veto, sectional extremism during nullification, fiscal complacency by eliminating the debt, congressional dominance by strengthening the presidency. In doing so, he reshaped American politics into a more participatory, mass democratic system. Voter turnout surged in the 1830s. Party organization became nationalized. The common man felt represented in the White House. Jackson once said, "The people are the government, administering it by their agents. They are the government, the sovereign power." He believed it, and he acted on it. Andrew Jackson was not subtle. He was not genteel. He would not have survived a modern cable news cycle without causing several producers to resign, but he possessed clarity of purpose. He believed concentrated financial power threatened liberty, disunion threatened survival, debt threatened independence, executive weakness threatened democratic accountability, and he fought accordingly. Disruption, in his hands, was not chaos. It was confrontation in defense of what he considered Republican principle. History does not require us to approve of everything he did, but it does require us to understand that sometimes entrenched systems require shock. Jackson provided that shock, and in doing so, he left the presidency stronger, the debt eliminated, the Union intact, and the American political system more democratized than he found it. Now, whether you admire him or not, one thing is certain. Andrew Jackson was never calm. And for a republic still defining itself, that storm may have been exactly what it needed. Thank you.